I'm trying to get a count number, not really. But these are just a questionnaire that we like to get. So if you're not staying for the potluck, I'll just pass the pile around and grab one. If you're, you know what, I'm going to spread a few out. No problem if you're not staying for the potluck, but if we can just get a questionnaire. If you are staying, then don't worry about it.
Alright, so you guys are gonna sit here and enjoy all these little snacks, and then we're gonna rotate. So what Tom and I are gonna be talking about is cultural differences that a lot of missionaries face. So we're gonna give you a few of some things that we went through, some funny, some embarrassing, which actually I will not tell. And some things, and also some stressful things that when you're a missionary living in another country, that things that you don't know about until you get there, and it sometimes can cause stress between just things that you didn't know, or maybe between you and your spouse because you didn't realize things. So, and then we're going to talk about the Sharps, and I do have some prayer cards, so if you would like to take one. They are missionaries that are church supporters. They're just in January went to Papua New Guinea, so they are going through a lot of realizing cultural differences, and Jamie has sent us some things, so we'll share some things that she has shared with us, and then we'll think of some prayer requests to pray for them as a family. So most of you guys know us, you know that we were missionaries in Peru for quite a while, for about 10 years. A beautiful country. We lived in the rainforest, just what you've ever seen on TV or pictures, that's where we lived. Our house was on stilts because of the change in the water all the time. It also kept a lot of creatures from living in our house, although some of them did anyways. So right around our house we had mango trees, we had banana trees, we had pineapple bushes, we had these huge tree with gourds, I don't know, but it had beautiful, apparently the butterflies loved the sap because the kids and I would sit out there with homemade Kool-Aid popsicles and just watch these beautiful butterflies. In our trees, we had monkeys, they would stare in the windows at us, we had sloths, we had lots of bats, they would stay on the eaves of our house and stuff, so just a lot of things. I always tell everyone, if you try to, the temperature there, the climate that we lived in was, think of your hottest day in the summer, 90 degrees, 80, 90% humidity, that's what it was like 11 months out of the year. We lived right on a lake, and we don't think about it much, but we all swam in the lake. There was piranha. We didn't even think about it. As long as you weren't bleeding, it didn't bother you. But it was a very, it was a great place to live. The Peruvian people are wonderful, and we really enjoyed it. But when Tom and I went, we didn't speak hardly any Spanish. I also we had Sesame Street Spanish. And we really didn't know a lot. Tom had gone down for 2 weeks before we went, and I sent him with a list of things to ask people just to kind of prepare us for what life was going to be like down there. It helped, but until you get there, then you really get in there. But so I'm a school teacher, so I worked at the mission school down there. I would help out in the elementary school. It was about 30 kids. They had one big group for elementary kids, middle school, and high school. So I worked in the elementary room just helping out. But most of the time I taught PE, that was what I did. And then since we had small kids, it would be very difficult to teach full-time in that environment and then take care of your family. Plus we lived about 30 minutes, 25 minutes from the school, where the school teachers lived right on the base and stuff. So they were very close and stuff. So that's pretty much what I did, and Tom will share what his jobs were.
I was involved with support ministry. We're with Sam Air. That's the airplanes, South American Mission Air. I worked on the airplanes primarily. Didn't do very much flying. Occasionally got up in an airplane. Mostly just did maintenance. That was our Monday to Friday job for me. Well, weekend sometimes, but ministry-wise, we were privileged to be part of a church plant, which started with a motocross type ministry that had all motorcycles and motocross stuff, and eventually evolved into a church that's still thriving in Pucallpa. So God privileged us to be part of that, and it really was a privilege to be part of what He was doing down there while we were there. So yeah, my part was in the hangar, so I spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff, working on hangars, working on motorcycles, motorcycles is the mode of transportation down there. So I worked on vehicles some too, but motorcycles was a big one. So some of the cultural implications of what that looked like. Kelly failed to mention when we got there, we didn't speak Spanish. The first thing we did was go down to southern Peru and spent 6 months living with the Peruvian family.
That sounds fun after you've been
Yes,
on your
sir.
own for
We've
20
been
some
married.
years to live with
We've
a
been
family.
married for 7 or 8 years at a time. 2 small children. We moved in with a Peruvian family. That is culture shock. That is. I look back on those 6 months between learning to live with that family because it was difficult. The way their children were treated was different. The way they treated our kids was different than what we were used to. Probably the most difficult 6 months of my life. However, it was also extremely advantageous. Besides learning the language very well, which if you're gonna learn a language, there's one way to do it. Go somewhere where they don't speak English. That's how you're gonna learn the language. If you can speak English with somebody, at least if you're lazy like me, you will. So, but they sent us somewhere where nobody spoke English. We had to do that. But the language school was great as well, and they had they worked with a lot of missionaries, not just from the U.S. but from Europe as well. They probably had as much influence on us as far as education culturally as anybody else. When we got to back to where we were serving, the mission administration, they spent some time with us as far as trying to culturally help us. But that time in Arequipa, I mean, I don't speak for Kelly, but for myself, I think we learned more about South American culture in general, but particularly Peru, than any other time when we were down there. It was a great. I look back on that, like I said, probably the hardest 6 months of my life, but probably one of the best 6 months of my life as well. It did help us with that part of it.
Yeah, and it was a totally different type of people that we were living with. So when we lived in Arequipa, that's like a city, kind of upper class. In fact, the Arequipans think they should be like their own country. They're very proud people, and they think they're kind of better than everyone else in the rest of Peru. But the reason why they sent us to a language school there is because actually the people who ran it are Christians, and the pastor was one of the teachers, so we went to the church, and it was great. The girls went to Sunday school class, and kids pick it up so much faster. Our girls went to a Habdin, which is a preschool. In 3 weeks they came back singing songs, talking to the people we lived with, and they were translating for John and I. Pretty much. So kids pick it up so fast. Yeah. So they would pretty much tell us, what we were saying and things like that, which kind of for Emily kind of went on their entire lives. Emmy was almost my translator. When people would get speaking fast, they'd be like, "What did they say?" and stuff. So the kids were great. But when we moved to the jungle, so Peru's beautiful. You have the coast along the Pacific, beautiful. You get to the Andes Mountains, which is we were kind of in the foothills. Arequipa is 7,000 feet. So we were in the mountains, beautiful. And then we ended up in the jungle, which I loved as well, but totally different group of people that we were working with. So one of the big culture things that I had to get used to is that, and it started when we were in language school, is they have very different eating times. Okay, they do breakfast in the morning, but lunch is like at 2 or 3 o'clock. And they're very hardworking people. Most of the Peruvians we knew work 6 days a week, sometimes 6 and a half. They work half a day on Sunday. So they work up till about 1, 2 o'clock, then they go home for lunch, have their siesta, eat lunch, and go back to work at about 4. So when we were on the base where we lived, because we lived with a bunch of other missionaries because of the airplanes and everything, we all had to stay close, just for security purposes. So during the week, we just did our usual, breakfast, lunch, eat at noon, dinner at 6. But if we went out with Peruvian friends, like supper, they didn't eat till like 8, 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock. So the first time we did that, let me just say we had some hangry kids. So the kids were whiny because we didn't think about it. We get there, we're hanging out at people's house, then we go out to dinner with them, and it was like probably 8:30, 9 o'clock by the time. So the kids were whiny. I'm mad because the kids they're whiny, they're being, stop it, like you're embarrassing us. They're hungry and stuff. So then we learned whenever we went out to eat with a Peruvian couple, we fed the kids before. If we went out after church, because it's still, you finish church, we weren't eating till like 2 o'clock, we would bring tons of snacks. So we kind of found that out the hard way. We did live with the couples, with the family, and they ate later. Maybe I was just thinking when I got to Bucolpe it would be different, but it wasn't. So that was kind of something that we also had to keep in mind if we were going out to eat. We always tried to keep, extra food for the kids, and I guess for us too. We got hungry too, but anyways, not Tom. Anyway, so that was a big thing, and then
How early was breakfast?
I think they normally eat 7 or 8. Yeah, and our kids, we actually put our kids in Peruvian Christian school. It was actually run by Korean missionaries, yeah, because we wanted them to be able to speak Spanish. So they would have a snack. They called I forget what they called it in Spanish, but they would have like a snack. But then the kids would go home and eat lunch. So even for our kids, so that was kind of, they had to get used to that and everything. So that was a big thing that we had to get used to. So the eating times, and then the weddings and birthday parties. Okay, the times, if it says the party's at 1, the party's probably starting at 3. If the wedding's at 1, it's starting at 3. Yeah. So, and I didn't believe this. So the kids, since they went to a Peruvian school, they had a lot of Peruvian friends. So we got invited to a lot of birthday parties. So we would go. I remember the first one. It said it was at noon. So I was talking to the other missionary ladies, and they're like, "Don't show up before 2. Don't get there." And I'm thinking, "Oh, come on, that can't be true. Who would ever do that?" So anyway, so I took their advice and I showed up at like 1:45, and it was me, my kids, the birthday kid, his parents, and his grandparents, until about 2. So we were there, and usually it's a big deal. I mean, it's grandparents, it's families, it's a meal, and this was early on, so my Spanish wasn't that great. Emily, what did they say? So we learned after that, if we ever went to a wedding, if it was at 1, don't show up till 3. So, but it's funny because like school starts on time, church starts on time. In fact, my maid used to tell me like if her kids weren't at school at 7, the doors closed and they weren't able to go in. It was done. And so they're very, and school's important. So my brother's like, woo, never have to go to school. But they take education very serious. So, I mean, their kids are there, they're in uniforms. And so when our kids went to Peruvian school, they had to wear uniforms and everything, which was actually an easy thing to do. So we have to get used to the time thing. So that was another big thing. And like I said, we did have a maid. It's not like that we were wealthy or anything. You're expected to, because in this society, in this culture, they're very poor people. Probably the average, what they would make a week would be a couple dollars.
$600 a day.
Okay. So anyway, so we would have a maid, because you were expected to help out, to help out people.
Provide work.
Yeah, provide work. So, which was fantastic. So I would have a maid three times a week. She would cook, she would clean, she would do laundry, she would make a fantastic Peruvian food. But she would help with the kids so once in a while. Mostly she was cleaning, but once in a while. But in Peruvians, especially little boys, they do not like them to cry. They will coddle them. They will give them whatever they want. It's just whatever they want. So if like Paul and James were asleep, they woke up crying, Lolly would run in there and get them, come out with them. And I'd be like, oh. And like a half an hour, they'll soothe themselves, let them cry, But you don't let them cry. So they would always get them. And if you were out somewhere, I know if my boys, if we were somewhere and they were starting to whine, Mom, I want this, you're not getting that, no. Oh, you want, in Peruvian cultures, oh, you want it, oh, here, honey, take it. So it was whatever they wanted, just keep them happy, give the boys. And my favorite example was when my kids were at Peruvian school, we were at this, a school thing, and these little boys were whining because, they were fine, they were talking in front of me, they wanted to get something to eat. And then when they got up there, the lady's like, well, we don't have it. And they're like, oh, Senora, I want it. She's like, well, we tried to get something. She did something, walked out, we're like, and they just walked out. So it's just a typical thing. So. Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So, along with that, it's funny because Peru is considered a macho society. I mean, if you look South America, you probably all heard that. South America is macho. When you actually get down to it, though, once you've spent time there, you realize it's really run by the mothers. It's run by the women. They really do kind of control things. And I think I can't read.
You got about like 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm not gonna talk too much because we want to talk about the sheriffs, but it is different. It is different. Things that we would consider rude or whatever for a guy to do is kind of normal down there. And along with that, like the matriarch thing, it's a macho society. But when Kelly got there, she had trouble with her paperwork because her name was Kelly Lynn Mitchell. Down there, you would keep your maiden name, so she should have been Kelly Lynn Schoolmaker of Mitchell. So the fact that she didn't have her maiden name in it, and then her kids, like our boys, we had trouble with their paperwork because it should have been Paul, what's his middle name?
Schoolmaker, so that was
that was the other part, right? So Paul Schoolmaker, it would have been Paul Schoolmaker Mitchell, or James would have been James Robert Schoolmaker Mitchell, but that's not the way their paperwork was. We actually had a lot of problems, and one of the things I was going to talk about, that I'm not going to have time, we're going to skip, was what do you think of when I say bride? I mean, that's absolutely, in this country, it's horrible, right? You hear about a police officer being bribed.
It's politicians.
Politicians, you think, it's got an extremely negative connotation. That's 10 minutes.
Yeah, so you got
All right, good enough. All right, extremely negative connotation. Well, bribing, and they may not call it bribing, but it's a way of life down there. They actually, you know what they call it? The word that they use for bribe is propina, which is the same word they use for tipping somebody in a restaurant.
Okay.
So it really is, and it's a different, so for our white Anglo idea, when somebody, you know, the police officer stops you, I didn't even give him money, but here's a Coke, well, you know what, it's the same thing. I'm giving him something for something he didn't earn or deserve, but, you know. He said, you know, you're going kind of fast. Is that a Coke you got there in the console? I'm kind of thirsty. Oh yeah, help yourself. You know, so it's that same mentality, but that's just one example of, and I mean, in our minds, that's a horrible thing, the idea of a bribe, but you get down there, and I mean, I worked with pastors, I mean, that's just the way things happen. And I don't mean necessarily slipping somebody $5 on the table, but it's just an expected way of life. You're helping somebody. What we would consider, you know, with our thinking, it's something you have to adjust to, but that's just an easy example of a culture, a big cultural difference. All right, we're talking about the Sharps for a minute. Some of the things, Kelly emailed, that was this one, right?
Yeah.
Kelly emailed Jamie and Chandler, I always want to say, and the Sharps, and just asked them about a few things that they run. Now they're the ones that Kelly started talking about in the beginning, talking about the ones in Papua New Guinea, and asking about some of the struggles that they've had. A couple of them, there's a story in there that they're running the guest house, so people come in. Well, they came in off the river. They were completely saturated. The women came in and she offered them, you know, here's some dry clothes, here's some towels, whatever. Well, they put all that stuff on. Well, the next day, she started thinking about, well, she never got the clothes back. Well, in that culture, if you give somebody a set of clothes and you don't specifically say, please wash them and bring them back, they just assume that that's your. Another thing that Jamie's spent a little bit of time talking about here is the idea of kind of helping each other out. So you're not indebted to somebody, but the idea is like what they're watching, not watching, what do they call it? Their house security guy that kind of walks around at night and does their security. He needed something, so he asked, you know, for something for them. Well, he asked for that. Well, pretty soon because he had asked for that, they needed something done. They needed a male hamster for their hamster or something. So he just shows up with a male hamster for them, and it's a I don't know the word exactly for it, but it's just expected, this give and take relationship that you have with people. There's a word for it, right?
Bargaining relations.
It's kind of like.
She said an indebted relationship.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like neighbors, like we do with neighbors, but kind of more the way neighbors were 50 years ago, perhaps. That it was.
And they're trying to figure this all out.
Yeah, they're trying to.
So,
And now they're afraid to. If I give them my
James
hamster,
down
am I
a
gonna get
couple
it back?
outfits,
So they're struggling with some of that stuff, but those are just a couple of very quick specific examples, things they're running. One of the things also they're running to, and this we're going to get through as well, is security stuff. We take a lot of that for granted. Well, Jamie can no longer just go to in this culture. She can't just go to the market.
Anywhere next to the neighbor's house.
Yeah, she has to be accompanied by a male. That's just the way it is. So if you're someone who's accustomed to, you know, just kind of doing your own thing, whatever. Now she can't even go to the neighbor's house without either her husband or somebody accompanying her there. If she goes to the market, she has to be accompanied.
So they're shopping together.
Yeah, so they're shopping together, and those are like little things that we don't necessarily think about, but when you leave this country,
Is that a Muslim country?
it's not.
It's not.
But it is, it's the same, it's not that different. It's not that different. Yeah. So Kelly's got some
Yeah.
prayer requests.
So if you would like to take one of the Sharps prayer cards, we'd love you to have it. And so and when you're thinking about that, if you pray for protection for them, they have 4 little kids. So, you know, and right now we're in charge of the guest house, but their mission decided, Ethnos 360 decided they really want them to really spend a lot of time on culture and language. So they brought in another family, which is nice. So there's another family there with them now, helping them, but they're really working on the culture and the language. So if you could also pray for that as well, because Tom and I found out the older you get, the harder it is to learn a new language. So also they're homeschooling their 4 kids. So prayers when we were in language school, and then the kids, you know, you're trying to juggle the kids and language learn and do your job. So it's a lot. And just that whole the language, help them with the language and the culture learning, because there's just a lot of, what language are they learning, Tom? What is it, Tom?
I think it's Pigeon. that what they call it?
Like the Haitian.
I'm telling you the truth, I don't know what it is in Papua New Guinea. I know Papua New Guinea has a lot of different languages, cause they're always,
It's not-
but right where they are, I'm not.
It's not pigeon, but it's something like that. It's the same one that they even did.
Oh, the
Bartons,
David Bartons,
yeah.
yeah.
I saw that on that.
Yeah, I don't
Flyer
remember.
we
It's
got
some,
last
it's not
night.
kind of an idea though. It's not completely different, but it's not the same either.
Oh, that's a good question. Jess was saying that the girls have to be escorted, can they work? Can they do?
Well, no, we don't think they should, like, her job's gonna be at the guest house. So
Yeah,
what
they're
they'll
at
be
the
doing,
guest
people will
house,
come in, and you know, and they, actually what their big thing they're doing is, what they'll be doing is buying for missionaries out in the, who are out deep in, like, the jungle and stuff like that. So they'll send them lists, they'll go to town, obviously Chandler's gonna have to go with her, she can't do it by herself. So they'll go with it and buy stuff or order things, and it comes there, but,
Typically Chandler will do that buying.
Yeah.
Jamie's buying is more for her family.
If there was a woman found alone, what would happen?
It's just not safe.
It's just not safe,
It's
yeah,
not,
yeah.
and it's not
Okay.
the correct, it's not correct.
I see.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, anyway, so if anyone would like to take one, I'll leave a few here if you would like one. Or, do you have one? Do you have one? Okay. She has one.
So they were here, Jamie and Chandler were here over the summer.
Yeah, they were here in September.
September,
Yeah,
actually,
they
yeah,
were here in
September. Yeah, so.
Yeah, so they would appreciate, because, you know, it always changes when you get there. They thought they were gonna be great in the guest house doing everything, and now they brought another couple, which is, I think it's good, just, and they were missionaries, where were they before? They were in,
Africa.
They were in Africa.
Specific countries.
yeah. So, I mean, they've gone through this before. So they've gone through this before, but it's a different language, different culture. I'm sure it's very different from where they were before and stuff, so.
Well, I will say, having been in Africa and South America, third world is third world. There are a lot of similarities, even there, so they definitely have a jump on things. Just gonna pray for them and we'll
Okay.
close. God, thank you for this opportunity this morning to think about how you make us different, how every people group has their own way of doing things. And Lord, sometimes we have in our mind what's right and what's wrong. And Lord, your word does tell us many things that are right and wrong, but in our own prejudiced views, sometimes we have our own ideas that aren't yours. Lord, help us to, when we're thinking about missionaries and the struggles they have and trying to understand some of the things that they have to do, and coming from our American mindset, as they go to different cultures, Lord, help them to adjust, to be sensitive. Some things don't even make sense, Lord, but that they would be sensitive to culture, that they'd be sensitive to these things that are important to other peoples that, again, maybe to you, it's not a right and wrong thing, it's just a different way of doing it. And God, I pray specifically for Jamie and Chandler, for some of the struggles they're having. It's just as they're adjusting, getting used to the idea of Jamie having to have somebody accompany her all the time, and the girls as well, and just a different situation with security and the way it's just a different way of living. And Lord, just pray your blessing on them. Thank you for each person here. Rest of the week, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you.
We're leaving, that's right. You guys-
Yeah, we're
you guys
leaving.
stay.